Well, hello, and welcome to the Voice of Reason. I am your host, Chris Kirk. And if you're wondering where everybody else is, they're just not here on account of a scheduling conflict. So they will be here next month. Not to worry, nobody's unwell or anything. They're all fine. And if I look a little battered tonight, that's just because I myself have been unwell. But I'm almost well now, so. We have a full agenda here tonight, so I'm not going to waste too much more time on introductions. The first topic is that the town has issued a contract for a feasibility study to plan and construct a new police station and associated modifications to the so-called municipal campus. That's the town hall, the senior center, and the police station. You may remember at the annual town meeting of May 2019, an article was approved for the appropriation of $250,000 to begin a multi-phase project which will ensure that these facilities or their replacements meet the operating needs of their respective departments. They're going to, the feasibility study will study the associated construction and modifications of not only the police station, but the town hall and the senior center. So all three buildings are under consideration at the moment. Frankly, I think the not only the police station. I've been inside the police station and I know that it's too small. They don't have meeting rooms. They don't. It's very cramped up there. It was fine when it was originally built, but Shrewsbury's done a lot of growing in there, and the police needs more space. So I'm in support of that. As for the town hall, that probably needs some more space too. And as for the senior center, well, I suppose, as long as you're going to fix up the police station and maybe do some expansion of the town hall, you might as well look at the senior center as well and do everything at once. The RFQ, the request for qualifications, has been issued, and the contract has been for the feasibility study has been awarded to Tecton Architects of Hartford, Connecticut, and their study on what they recommend, along with preliminary architectural designs, sketches, will be submitted in fall of 2020, this year. So that is one item in progress. Another one is the development of the former Edgemere Drive-In. I think we have an article here from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette of January 29th. Yep, there we are. And so if you saw that, then you know that they're going to be, the developer intends to spend like about $45 million on this project, and it will include 250 apartments, and to my sister's delight, it will include a Market Basket supermarket. My sister's a big enthusiastic supporter of Market Basket, so she may pay me more visits. And this map that you see now on your TV screen, this gives you an idea of what the layout will be. Oh wait, before we go into that, just I think we could look at a map of. I think we have a map of the town. Just for the help of people, yeah. Just in case you don't know where this parcel is, it's in the south west corner of town. You'll see that almost horizontal line, that's Route 20, and the squiggly line, the blue line that intersects it, that's Lake Street, and that red blob there, that's Edgemere. That's the former Edgemere Drive-In property. And now I think if we can go back to the this shows you what is actually proposed. You see the red line up at the top, that's Route 20. We've got Lake Street intersecting it, and then the site of the former Edgemere Drive-In. The green boxes, those are retail properties, and the big blue blob in the center, that will be the Market Basket supermarket. The retail properties are important because the town wants to develop as much retail development in town as possible, because that is where as Willie Sutton said, why do you rob banks? That's because that's where the money is. So the retail operations are basically, they produce more tax revenue than they require expended on them. So those are the sources of revenue to the town. And the planning board negotiated with the developer to squeeze in as much retail property as possible. And apparently the planning board did a good job. The project is right now under MEPA review, which is the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. This allows nosy people like me to make comments on the environmental impact of this project. Not to worry, though, I am not going to make trouble for them. After the MEPA process is concluded, then construction will start, and that is expected to take about 12 to 15 months. There's going to be about 145,000 square feet of commercial space, of which 78,000 square feet is going to be the Market Basket supermarket. It will be the sixth grocery store here in town, in addition to Price Chopper, Shaw's, Stop & Shop, Whole Foods, and Trader Joe's. Our cup runneth over. Could we go back to that slide showing where the buildings on the property? Yeah, I just want to point out, you'll notice that there are these sort of oblong shapes that have little squiggles along the sides. Those are the actual apartment buildings. Those are the 250 units of apartment buildings. So that gives you an idea. What it gets, the edges of the property are going to be, which are basically water, wetlands. That's going to be left intact, and so the apartments will be built on nice dry ground. So that gives you an idea of what's coming up with that project. So we have that to look forward to, as probably starting this year, I hope. And another item that we have under consideration here is the progress that has been made by the Water and Sewer Department and their plans for this coming year or so. Been in contact with Mr. Dan Rowley, who is superintendent of water and sewer. Mr. Rowley informs us that you may remember that the town has been trying for years to determine where there are leaks in the water mains of the town's water service. And the reason that is important is that basically what happens is the town needs to get more water for the residents. Town has grown a lot in recent years. The problem is that there are environmentalists who do not want us to draw any more water out of the ground. They're afraid that it will draw down the aquifer, lower the level of streams and ponds and such in and around the town, which to me is inconceivable because many of us have some pumps in our basement to prevent the groundwater from infiltrating our basements. I have one. And Nevertheless, they say, that the environmentalists say, they don't want any more water drawn out of the ground until the problem of leaks from the water pipes has been addressed, which is not unreasonable, because if about 1/3 of the water that comes out of the ground ends up leaking out of the system. And so if we could just reduce that to 0 or even 10%, most water systems lose about 10%. If we could just reduce that significantly, we would have enough water so that to provide for our needs. As it is, we have to buy water from other municipalities. So this is important. The town hired a contractor to detect leaks, Prowler Water Conservation, and they've completed their survey of the water mains in town. And they will be submitting a final report to the Superintendent of Water and Sewer. And they did identify several service leaks, which the town's water crew has repaired. But there are other problems with the water service here in town, one of which is some pollutants. We have already addressed one of the pollutants, which is tetrachloroethylene, which is used as a solvent in things like dry cleaning and it's in industry. So, that's removed from the water supply with a process called air stripping. And we've also set up a fancy new high-tech treatment facility to remove excess manganese from the water. That process involves bacteria, but there are still 2 nasties left in the water supply. One of them is chromium-6, which is a carcinogen, and I think we have a slide here. I think we have a slide of a map showing where this is a map of the town. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner there, you'll notice that there's an X and there's sort of a rough oval there. Now, the town, according to an article in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette of the 10th of January 2017, the town believes that the chromium-6 that's infiltrating our water system comes from a old metal plating company that operated in the 1930s, Gillespie Platers, at 722 Plantation Street in Worcester. That is where that X is. That shows where Gillespie Platers used to be. That company is now defunct. However, the water that flows into Shrewsbury's aquifers, from which we draw our water, flows roughly from the upper left towards the lower right, roughly diagonally across your screen. And so it's washing the chromium that was dumped into the ground by Gillespie into the town's water wells. And where are the town's water wells? Well, they are encircled by that crude oval. And those circles that are white on the bottom and black on the top, those are where the wells are. So the chromium is being washed into those wells. The chromium can be, there are plans to remove the chromium-6 from the water supply. It can be done by a couple of methods. One is called reverse osmosis, and the other one is called ion exchange. Ion exchange basically involves what you have like plastic beads that are coated in various chemical salts, and what happens is the chromium-6 replaces the, for example, sodium or potassium that's coating these beads. And so the chromium sticks and the potassium is let loose, and so that way you gather up the chromium. Or the other way is reverse osmosis, which is you concentrate any of the nasties by passing it through a sort of a filter. and that way you can get rid of it. But another problem is if you received in the mail from the town's water and sewer department one of these, which is a notice about PFASs, which is perfluoroalkyl substances. And what these chemicals are is they are basically chemicals that are related to Teflon. They're chemically related to Teflon. And they are used, they've been used for, since the 1950s to make materials that are grease resistant, water resistant, stain resistant. They're used to make Teflon in your cookware. They're used to make grease resistant surfaces on, for example, takeout containers, and they're used in upholstery and carpet treatments. They're also used in some firefighting foams. So, unfortunately, this stuff is not degraded by just about anything. It just lasts for, once it's in the environment, it's there forever. And so what is the concern about them? It is that they can interfere with the body's natural hormones. They can affect the immune system, and they can increase the risk of some cancers. This is largely based on animal studies, however, so they're not 100% sure. They've given very high doses to animals and found changes in liver, thyroid, pancreatic functions, changes in some hormone levels, but they do warn you that they're not entirely sure that these chemicals have the same effect on human beings. However, the town's water contains about 13.56 parts per trillion. Trillion, not million, not billion, trillion. That's a trillion is. A trillion is 1,000 times smaller, or it's 1,000 times, would it be, that's 1,000 times smaller than parts per billion, which in turn is 1,000 parts smaller than parts per million. So this is present in very small quantities. At present, it's recommended by the federal EPA and by the state that the amount present be lower than 70 parts per trillion, which Shrewsbury's water is, but the state guideline is probably going to be changed to 20 parts per trillion. That's the upper limit. So the proposal is to get rid of this stuff as much as possible. And the EPA has several different ways recommended several different ways of getting rid of this stuff. One is using granulated activated carbon. Another is through, again, ion exchange resins, and another one is through reverse osmosis. So they have, the town has secured agreement with its water consultant, Tata and Howard, to set up a trial pilot plant to try to remove both the chromium and the fluoroalkyl substances, these chemicals that are related to Teflon, and they're going to be doing two pilot projects, and by late spring, the first one will be underway. They hope to complete them by the end of the complete test by the end of the year, and then they will move towards securing funding for the design and construction of a real water treatment facility to remove these pollutants. So, making progress in water and sewer. Also, just a quick update. You may remember in, I think it was, I don't know whether it was January or December, but we told you that the Waste Management is hoping to deal with, get some updated, nice new trucks that will be able to do a better job of sorting recyclables, and those trucks are on the way. Also, another bit of good news, and that is that the town's pension fund is fully funded. You may remember that Mr. Morgado, former town manager, said that he had a banner that he used to hang up in his office. It was said 2022 or bust. In other words, the town pension fund would be fully funded by 2022. Well, we have done it already. We have achieved our goal. And that means that $1 million a year that previously was going into that pension fund is now freed up for other purposes. And it's going to be devoted to capital purchases. It would be nice if it went to tax cuts, but no such luck. And finally, it has been proposed that the town put on the agenda or the warrant for the annual town meeting in May that a Community Preservation Act be adopted by the town. What is a Community Preservation Act? It raises money for we'll get to the calculation in a second. It involves raising money through a property tax, a surtax on the property tax bill, and it allows that money to be accumulated in a fund. The money can be spent on historic preservation. For example, you might want to buy an old house to prevent it from being demoed. It's also useful for building low-income housing. It's also useful for can be used for buying open space. And in addition, if you adopt this town gives you a share of the money that they collect from deeds that are filed with the Registry of Deeds. So you get some state money as well. Now the question is, how much are you going to pay? How much would this Community Preservation Act cost you? Okay, we have a sample calculation of how much it would cost you. Basically, we start out with the average assessed value, the assessed value of the average home in Shrewsbury, which is about $478,000. The act allows for a $100,000 exemption. So if you exempt $100,000 from that, the assessed value of the house, you get down to $378,000. You then apply the property tax rate to the $378,000. The property tax rate is $12.47 per thousand, and that gives you a tax bill of $4,700 roughly. And then 1% of that is the amount that you would pay towards the Community Preservation Act, and 1% of $47,000 is about $47.21 per year. That's per year. And that's not just a one-time charge. That would be in perpetuity. So the advocates, the people who are promoting this, estimate that this would bring in about $500,000 a year, and that does not include the amount of money that would be chipped in by the state. To date, 176 cities and towns have adopted the Community Preservation Act, and so how do we go about adopting it? There are basically two ways that you adopt it. It has to be put on the ballot. It has to be, the voters of the town have to approve it. There are two ways to do it. One way is to have the town meeting agree to put a question on the ballot to adopt the Community Preservation Act. And the other way to do it is to have people just go around and collect signatures, and if 5% of the community's registered voters sign the petition, then it can be put on a ballot for a vote by the townspeople. So you will have a direct say in this issue. Again, there are a number of exemptions to the surcharge. For example, one of the possibilities is property owned and occupied as a domicile by people who would qualify for low-income housing or low or moderate-income senior housing in the town can be exempted, although they have to apply annually for the exemption. Some industrial towns that are classed separately can be exempted, but we don't have that in this town. The first $100,000 of the taxable value of real estate can be exempted, and that is what is being proposed. And finally, any property taxes that are exempt under Chapter 59 of the Mass General Laws would also be exempt. So, again, that's up being considered for the annual town meeting in May. We don't know whether they're going to make it. The advocates of the proponents of this idea are working their way through the machinery of government. And finally, I will squeeze in here in the last minutes that I help out in a municipal park here in town. It's called Prospect Park. It's north of the center of town. If you know where Route 140 is and where Prospect Street splits off, there's a little triangular traffic island north of the center of town. Behind that, north of that, is a parcel of undeveloped land. That's Prospect Park. And thanks to a volunteer, Brenda Goodwill, she's a commercial gardener here in town, and she's volunteered to help out, and she has grand, ambitious plans. So if you would like to volunteer to help out with this coming season's work, which would include doing plantings and tidying things up, and or also there are plans to make repairs to an old garden that's here in town, repairing walls and old historic structures that are on the property. Might need the services of, if there's any masons, bricklayers, or carpenters who would like to either donate their time or work for cheap, that would be gratefully accepted. So I have put in my plea for that, and with that, thank you for tuning in this edition of The Voice of Reason. We look forward to seeing you next month.